to certify the EIR, and I will be voting to reject the project in its entirety. Thank you.
Is that your final word?
Normally, in these proceedings, the person representing...
I'm passing to defer to the district is in.
And normally in these type of proceedings, the person who represents that district normally talks first to get his position and how he feels on the project. However, I would like to ask the board and the chair to be able to speak last on this particular project.
That's fine. I already spoke.
Your choice. Supervisor Callaway, would you like to weigh in on this?
You're up.
All right. Well, this moment reminds me a little bit of an advertisement I've seen on TV for Southwest. A bunch of embarrassing things happen to a person, and the announcer intones, "Want to get away?" And then presumably you buy the ticket and get the heck out. That's not an option for me today, although the instinct is to some extent there. Also, given that I must comment on this, I would have to first announce that I have found personally, notwithstanding the previous speaker, a nexus between ag and golf. And this comes from having married into a golfing family. Up to that point, I actually never been on a golf course. And it was noted by my many in-laws that I actually have my swing and hacking actually resembles the work of a rototiller and the ability to plow ground in my game. But as we deal with this issue, before I get into the specifics on the EIR or the overriding consideration, etc., I'd like to talk about a few things that have gotten us here. There are somehow, this has become the most commented upon. I think I have now 2,200 pages in writing and many hours of public comment that has really taken up a great deal of attention, county, press, this board for a long time. And nevertheless, we have issues here in this county that are more profound. In my district, we have an enormous number of foreclosures. We have homelessness, people living in tents out in the woods. We have the timber industry just announcing there are 2 more mills closing, and there's nothing going on this year. We have our gas stations closing because they're the small guys, and we have new law that was previously brought up by one of the speakers this morning. Our food banks are running out of food. The county faces a budget deficit that is not just a budget deficit, but a services crisis. And what I would like to say is that despite all of the discussion about this project either being the end of civilization as we know it or the salvation for all things that afflict us, I actually find that all fairly overblown compared to these day-to-day issues that are facing my constituents. And I actually regret that this project has become kind of a lightning rod for all things wrong with the county, all things that we might somehow do to help ourselves out. It's become way too focused and way too simplistic, in my view. Economic recovery, economic transition from old industries to new really requires a much broader perspective on what makes economic progress and what doesn't. As Tom described, there has been a lot of vilification of county staff. Actually, there's been a lot of vilification, period. But what I found is that this staff has been working its butt off under almost impossible and ever-changing circumstances. Just getting a handle on what is before us has been actually a multi-year evolution. And so when we face 2,200 pages of information, we're trying to analyze. We have a series of laws we're supposed to be following, a series of rules and regs. And what this has amounted to is a target that moves by strategy, not so much by formal application. But we do have an application in front of us. And there have been strategies that have been employed here, which I think have really created a moment for this county that is somehow more than a golf course. What kind are we a county of laws? Do we apply them equally to all? Do we have some businesses competing at one level of regulation and yet others competing at another? Do we have a general plan and zoning code that we adhere to? And what's the effect of that? In the midst of all this, people have choices about how to propose projects. It seems to me that we've been subjected to some pretty interesting approaches. I've been told we'll be sued no matter what we do. Of course, that's really uplifting for the possibility of creative solutions, negotiated outcomes. Personally, I think conflict resolution is better than conflict creation, but the strategies that people have employed in this have taken communities that were pretty much, at least relatively peaceful, and set them upon one another. I don't find that, from any perspective, to be particularly beneficial to this county. Surely, somewhere along the line, when this all is said and done, there might have been moments where reasonable people, before they became less reasonable by virtue of personal attack, could have come together and found an outcome that would be better than the all or nothing that is truly before us. Supervisor Tryon did really accurately describe what we have here today. There's no middle ground left. There's no compromises that could see reasonable outcomes. There's only our way or the highway. And even that, no matter which way we'll go, this board will not be deciding the outcome. It will be decided in court. And so for people like the Taxpayers Association, people who care about how government monies are spent, the idea that we could have on a golf course wound up to the point where we could actually threaten to break the county, and that's supposed to somehow influence our view of it, I find repulsive and wrong. And the amount of emotion that has gone into this, and the level of threat that really almost subsumes the issue, is one of the most regrettable aspects of all. We do have choices. We can work together. We can work at opposites. We can find common ground, or we can find discussion only around our differences. And ultimately, we can litigate, or we can negotiate, or we can mediate. And it seems to me those choices have already been made for me. I have my own views about what of those would be the best choices, but that has been accomplished by many of the people in this room, as well as folks not with us. One thing's for sure, that whether there's a golf course or not, whether there's a project or not, these animosities will remain, and that the people who help create them have some obligation to step down and get back to being the kind of communities that people actually come here to appreciate. All right, so what do I think about the project? We have water issues, I guess I get back to Trian's discussion on infrastructure. Water, sewer, roads. How are we doing in relation to that? Does our commitment to agriculture mean something or not? Is this something in the middle of an ag zone, in the middle of ag properties, and does it have a downside effect? In my view, we have neither the infrastructure here, not the proven infrastructure, particularly when we talk about how we apply our road mitigations. I've been shocked to find that a single property between a parent and a kid in my district sometimes results in a tremendous amount of road mitigation required, sometimes for the whole length of a road. Before the project begins, I find that when in my district somebody builds a garage without a permit, if it's any bigger than 10 by 12, I've had people asked to remove the garage. This is small people, but they're just as important as any other person in a democracy. To me, that's one of the fundamental questions here, is are we being fair and the same to all people? I've had a hard time on the mitigations in the EIR because it's based on 12,000 rounds, and yet the economics and the request for an overriding consideration seems to be primarily based on economic arguments. I'll get to those in a minute. But you have to have the same basis for the two issues. You can't have an overriding consideration that's based on an optimistic economics that it has many more rounds of golf implied than what is before us. I think if we were to, as again Tryon suggested, split the baby, that we're essentially condemning us to a long process similar to what we've just been through. That there will be this continuous battle between a viable project, or making a viable project, and the one we approve. So while I commend staff for their effort to find compromise, to actually ultimately try to mediate, what might have been done by reasonable people long ago, it comes after the fact and is not something that I feel I can base my view on, because it truthfully does not, the county position does not really ultimately, in my view, permit a viable project. And yet, when we ask for a statement of overriding consideration, I can't find an expert opinion. The ones that were brought before us, at least the applicants' opinions, are so flawed in their calculations. I guess an 800% mistake on the sales tax revenue alone was kind of a downer for me. But when you got into the other issues, that get into no reduction, it doesn't even calculate reductions to other businesses, and yet says that these are people who will be coming from out of county, which is what the other golf courses in the community are relying on. So there's got to be some offset there in our calculations. Secondly, the high-end $125 per round seems to me to be very optimistic, especially in the current financial conditions, and especially given the reduction in fees all around. Even in the Bay Area, some exclusive places are going below that. I also find on the overriding consideration on economics that we are basing our presumptions on the idea that people on one property away from San Joaquin County are going to somehow do their shopping up country rather than where they live or where they're coming from. I won't go into all the details for the problem. I do find some advantages. Retail outlet for local farmers is a good thing, but overall, you can't mitigate 10, 11 environmental unmitigable, or you can't overcome the unmitigable environmental impacts without there being something more solid than what's before us on the economics. For that and many other reasons, and I know we are limited for time, so I won't belabor the point, but I joined Supervisor Tryon on the issues of infrastructure, on the problems with the EIR, on the inability to find a middle ground that would be acceptable, and with an all-or-nothing reality in front of me, I fear there is no legal route to approval of this project for the supervisor.
When I reviewed this plan, I didn't look at the past. I started with the revised draft environmental impact report and then the final environmental impact report. I did not support approval of the final environmental impact report since I did not feel there was enough evidence to show that the project would not substantially deplete groundwater supplies, and it didn't prove that the groundwater would not impact nearby wells or impact planned uses. As much as I really like the vision of the project and the vision of the applicant, I felt under the CEQA guidelines the project would conflict with the general plan by not being able to mitigate the environmental effects, i.e. would have been the number of events, the more noise, traffic, the intensity of its use. Not just golf. Golf in and of itself was not the issue. But we'll be talking about restaurants, banquet facilities, retail, concession stand. Concession stand could be a 5-star concession stand. So for those reasons, I didn't vote for certifying the final environmental impact report, even though I know recreation is consistent with the general plan. The supplemental requests, the clubhouse, restaurants, hotels, I felt were incompatible with the surrounding area. This board approved the ag zoning, adding agritourism. I know I voted against it, but it was a majority vote of the board. And they did not include golf. The board also approved having an ag element, which I did not support, to the general plan, but this board did, and the draft ag element to the general plan does not include golf, again, in the confines of talking about agritourism. And here we were taking ag land, be it as our farmer advisor said that it doesn't have a lot of value for cattle grazing, but to rezone it to recreation, which I felt would have an intensity of use in the area, in essence creating this sort of island in the middle of ag land, and then having to grant a conditional use permit to continue ag operations that are already in existence. So without going on, I think, to repeat what my colleague said, but as council said, we had to balance the various economic, legal, social, technological aspects of the project to come up with statements of overriding consideration. I could not come up with those for my position for the statements of overriding considerations on those impacts that the environmental impact report stated we could not mitigate.
Okay, it is true that we have all these elements of the water, traffic, and ag versus the rec, and economics versus continuation of a marginal farming practice in the county. I have to say at the onset here that we have 3 supervisors who have talked to said that they are not in favor of approving this project. I, however, could easily approve it, and I want to explain in detail my reasons why, because I have steadfastly told everybody that put me in this office that I would fairly frequently disagree with them, perhaps not always, but they can depend upon me elaborating the specific reasons why I am not voting the way that they would want me to vote. The first and foremost thing is that I live across the street from the entrance to Saddle Creek Golf and Country Club, and this is it's a beautiful facility. I don't have to pay the taxes on having a home inside the gate. I can enjoy the vista that is created by that development out of my front yard. I'm kind of up above it and look down upon it, and it's a very enjoyable place to live. That particular facility, I'm told, plays upwards of 37,000 rounds annually. They have 350 houses that exist currently inside that gate. The gate is right in my line of sight as I look out my front door. There are another 300 houses that are on down Little John Road. And I mean, I can honestly say to anybody here that I have never seen any kind of traffic condition that would even remotely qualify as a gridlock or anything. There was one time when I observed 2 cars in the line going in, and I was the second car. There are wonderful events that take place at that facility, specifically the Calaveras County Arts Commission. They've recently changed the venue to put it in Copper Town Square, but for years they had their summer concert program, and they would have it at Saddle Creek. It was the beginning event, and there would be, I'm sure, 500 people there, 300 to 500 people, and there was absolutely no adverse consequences to the traffic going in or going out for those events. Nor, I want to repeat that with 37,000 rounds and 350 houses inside this development, I personally, nor any of my neighbors have been adversely impacted by the traffic problems on Little John Road. So I really can't get enthusiastic about saying that the traffic problems on Hospital Road or southward would ultimately be a problem with 6 to 9 to 12,000 rounds of golf, because they certainly do not. I don't see them with 37,000 rounds and 350 houses, by the way. Okay, the paradox and what I'm hearing my colleagues say about, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I kind of hear them say that I could get behind this project if it had water and sewer available. But in the way that our development standards exist in this county is that if we did have water and sewer available out at that particular point in the county, then we'd very likely be looking at development proposals down to quarter-acre lots, and I would agree wholeheartedly that is not the type of development that we want to see in that particular corner of the county. The fact of the matter is that the application that we have here, it has been custom designed with the full participation of some past and some perhaps present county staff, that they had this said, okay, well, what could we do here? Well, they were encouraged to say, well, you could do 20-acre densities. it's consistent with the general plan to do 20-acre densities in that zone. Actually, I think that there has been evidence that it could have gone to a greater density than that. So I personally haven't seen anything in the record, quite the contrary. I've seen testimony, both written and at the podium, where we had representatives from CCWD, we had, very highly qualified hydrogeologists telling us that, that this is one of the peculiar things about this particular spot, is that there is a reservoir of water there that the science would indicate that there's sufficient water for the uses that are being applied for. Then we go to the ag versus the rec uses. I happen to come from a county that they do regard golf courses as being an amenity that is referred to as open space. I mean, I go to publications from the Department of Agriculture, and they say that for people who have established farming operations that want to preserve their ownership of the land under dire economic circumstances. I mean, can anybody realistically believe that you could pay the taxes on this 240 acres by grazing cows? I mean, everybody acknowledges that it's going to produce $36 an acre revenue. And from the involvement that I've had with get my own hands dirty in dehorning and castration and stuff, it's kind of a paradox, because it's a lifestyle that everybody loves in this county, and don't think for a moment that I'm not a proponent of it, but you can only survive doing that type of agricultural pursuit and with the benefit of having neighbors who also like the lifestyle and are willing to come over and donate their time. And so I see this somewhat nonsensical suggestion that we've heard people say that the only way to make this right is to rip out this golf course and put back the grazing practices that were there. My mind wants to explode when I hear that argument, because it purely is relegating this family and any other family in similar circumstances to indentured servitude, I guess. It would be the way that I would characterize it, of being committed or unable to extract themselves from dependence on this, what has been characterized as the lowest economic use of land in our county. Raising grass and cows on it it's been, my experience, it's very unpredictable and marginal at best. So I think that the improvements that have been made by this applicant to the horticulture out there, the improvements that they've made on that 100-year-old olive orchard, plus the fact that they brought in so many trees that were going to, had it not been for the fact that they transported them and planted them around the perimeter of the property, they would have gone into a burn pile. I think that that's commendable, and if anybody who would have taken the time to go out there, you could see that they're also doing the trellis olives adjacent to this thing. This is a family, in my mind, that you can say anything you want to about their initial motivations, but their carry through, the enormous, the unfathomable amounts of money that has been spent on the economic analysis here. Because people have said at the onset that other people would have to do this economic analysis, do an EIR. So we said, okay, that makes sense. Let's make them do it, and we had. In fact, I think this is maybe up to 3.5 EIRs that they've been forced to do. I think that in this particular spot, would not, based on my personal observations, again, the risk of being overly redundant, I live across from a use that is far more intense than this, and it gives me great pleasure to look out upon that golf course environment. It has no adverse consequences whatever for me. And I would predict that the people who have been adamantly saying, oh my goodness, there's going to be wrecks on the road, there's going to be all sorts of catastrophic consequences to the approval of this project, that those suggestions, those admonitions are not well founded. I feel badly for the sense that I'm getting right there. I think I'll conclude my comments with that.
First off, I want to thank the staff for the time that they put in on this project. Just in the short 4 months that I've been here on the board, it seems like it's been every weekend, all week, everybody's just working on this project. Dennis and Shannon have put in so many hours on this thing to get to where it is, to present us with what you have. Thank you very much. Supervisor Walensky brought up the fact that we had 2,200 pages. In fact, I think it to be more like 2,500 pages. Just in the last week, we've taken on and emails and so many people. This project, for the number of years that it has been in the forefront in this county, has divided our communities. It's divided friends, and hopefully it hasn't divided families. Everywhere you go in this county, it comes up during any conversation, anybody you run into. Even people, when I go to the market, stop me and want to talk about this project. To me, it's a project that has created a tremendous amount of stress to the 5 members of this board. I know all of us in our own worlds have stressed and agonized over what we were going to do with this project and where we stood. And I think most of us did not come to that conclusion, if not all of us did not come to that conclusion until probably this weekend, or even some of us this morning, on what we were going to do. All the public comments, I want to thank all the people for coming forward, not only at our meeting on the 14th, but also on the Planning Commission to give their thoughts on how they felt on this project. And it has become a winner-take-all. It seems there's no mediation here. There's no, as it's been brought up, splitting the baby. It's been drawn a line, and it's either you're for it or you're against it. Many of the people that spoke and emails, not even a small percentage of the people offered some mediation on it. On how it could be worked out to where the applicant could have what he's seeking and the neighbors could have what they were seeking. The other day when one of the commenters brought up a bag full of golf balls that were taken out of the 7th fairway, the neighbor that butts the 7th fairway, I thought that was a perfect opportunity for the applicant or his representation to say, I'll plant trees along there and put netting up, so they won't even see the netting. It'll be nice shade trees, and they wouldn't be able to see. I mean, there was lots of things that were brought forward that could have been said so everybody could live together, and people could say, okay, I'm willing to do that if you're willing to do this. It just on this project doesn't seem to be any of that. And I've gone to meetings. Just several weeks ago, I attended a meeting with East Bay Med in the town hall here. were many of the faces that I see here today on both sides of this issue were all together on that issue. It seems that this community has a history of that, but for some reason this particular project just seems to be a Mason-Dixon line here. There's no common ground. There is no splitting of the baby. As far as the idea that ripping out, denying the project and ripping out the existing golf course that's there now and putting it back to grazing land, I don't know if that's possible. I think you're going to run into a whole lot of other environmental impact problems doing that. So I am in favor of this project for a lot of those reasons. I don't think it can be put back. I think the staff worked very hard to come up with mitigation measures that would reduce the impacts. I think the testimony of GeoCon and CCWD as far as water for the project, and the fact that the applicant is willing to put test wells there and monitor the water levels, and also form a partnership with CCWD to bring surface water out there, in my mind settles some of the water issues that we have here. I'm in favor of defending the EIR as written. I think staff is given that to us. And so I am in favor of this, and I will be voting for it in favor. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the board's comments. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion of intent to deny the certification of final environmental impact report and to deny the project in its entirety.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All in disagreement or not in favor of the motion say aye. Aye or no? I'd like to say something else, but so we have 3 votes to deny the certification of the final environmental document, and 2 that would be in favor of it. That's the...
Continue it 1 week so that we can bring the proper back to reflect that.
I move for a 1-week continuance.
The clerk's pointed out to me that there is a very heavy agenda next week. If you plan any discussion at all, put it on. Okay.
Okay.
1 week. 2 weeks, if next week is
Put it on for next week.
Next week, then.
Okay, we have a motion
For 1 week.
for 1 week continuance and a second. All in favor of that motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion is carried. This meeting is in recess until 1:30. We can do it at
Everybody can grab this.